Hi, my name's Jen. We're here to talk to you today about developing voice technologies for children. And particularly, we're going to look at bringing together the technical aspects with the ethical considerations of how we engage children with these voice technologies safely and responsibly, particularly within the context of the creative industries. And my colleague Sondess and I will talk you through today an exciting project that we've been involved in, and some of the findings as we've gone along in this initial stage. So we are both researchers in DC Labs, the Digital Creativity Labs, and that's based on Hes East in the University of York. It's an interdisciplinary lab, so what you see there is a range of different researchers working from across different backgrounds, working together on different projects. So we have people from education, from psychology, philosophy, the humanities and social sciences, working alongside people from computer science and neighbouring disciplines. And the reason for that is that we're interested in bringing together new perspectives to help develop impact, really, to think about how these ideas can really impact the real world and the creative industry. So we have people interested in games, we have people interested in thinking about storytelling, but also a range of different areas like health technologies, and some of us are working on the technical aspects of those ideas, and some of us are reflecting on the social implications of those. And I certainly fall more into the latter camp, with my background being as a social scientist, somebody who has considered for many years through my research the ethics and the philosophy or the political connotations of development in technology. I'll just introduce my colleague Sondess here.
Yeah, hi everyone. So with my background in artificial intelligence and more specifically in information retrieval and NLP, I'm trying to apply natural language processing tools and information extraction technology to a wide range of projects at DC Labs, going from moment-to-moment prediction in esports to more social impactful projects related to young people and news literacy skills and how to improve the skills through machine learning technology.
So Sondess and I have been working together to pull our ideas really and to do something quite new, which is to think about how these technologies can affect children. And in particular, there is a real focus on this. So, as I mentioned, the Digital Creativity Labs is collaborating with BAFTA award-winning digital agency Joy Poloi. And Joy Poloi approached the university because they really wanted to develop a sort of a meta story chat tool. So let's imagine you or I or your child is sitting watching their favorite TV program, and they're engaged with it, and they're really, really happy, they're really entertained by it. And they want to kind of develop that interaction even further. Well, Joy Poloi in this project started developing a meta story chat tool to do just that. And there's other areas in the industry who have started to think about this and really employ voice technologies in this way to enhance a story experience. And what they did was they wanted to think about how do we develop a meta story chat tool, in this case a voice assisted kind of technology for children specifically, and what are the ethical issues? How can we develop a set of principles or things to just reflect on, if you like, as developers, to engage children safely with these characters from their homes in a way that is responsible, in a way that their parents consent to, in a way that they are kept safe, very importantly. And of course, the important thing to remember is that such devices like Amazon Alexa or Google Home are ubiquitous, and many people have them in their homes. And so the idea was to use that sort of technology to enable children to reflect on what they've watched and hopefully to enhance their experience. The Joy Poloi project is nearing completion with a prototype tool, and what we've done through that project, certainly my main part of the project, was to actually review the literature to see who else has been looking at the ethics of this, and I'm going to walk you through some of those implications, and hopefully this will prompt some discussion. Just to start then, we always start with a definition. What is conversational AI? So you'll see this term CAI maybe abbreviated throughout our talk. But these are essentially technologies like chatbots or voice assistants which users can talk to. So it's about interaction. It's about dialogue. They use large volumes of data, as Sondess was describing earlier. They rely on machine learning, NLP, natural language processing, so that it can augment and imitate even the human interaction that we might have around the dinner table. Perhaps one day we'll have young people perhaps talking more to these agents than necessarily the family members, and of course there are implications there. But of what these tools do is recognize speech, text input, and translate their meanings across various languages. And of course, these are ubiquitous in our lives. We know them most well. Sort of known forms of conversational AI are things like Cortana, Alexa, Apple, Siri. We're talking about those kinds of effective ways of engaging. And you can see a quote here: already 1 in 4 children between 5 to 16 years of age live in a household with a voice activated virtual assistant. Now that was a 2019 quote, and I'm sure it may have increased, and particularly perhaps through the pandemic even more so, as people have been developing ways of, and reliances perhaps on technology. So as I've described, there's an increased attention on the implications of conversational AI, and that's particularly with respect to children's cognitive, social and linguistic development. In particular, if we think about a child engaging with something like this, it immediately raises questions about cognitive function. How do they learn as a response in a response to working discussing with an agent? What social skills or pro-social behavior might they be learning? And equally, what negative sort of social skills may be a result? And then linguistically, how are they understanding commands? How are they understanding development of question forming, question making, etc.? So there's a whole host of different issues around this sort of cognitive, social, linguistic development that appears in the literature, and these things relate very closely to the broader ethical questions. And this all comes about at the same time as there being a backdrop, if you like, in technology development around the ethicization, as we're calling it here, but really where people are starting to tackle the social implications, thinking more urgently about who this harms, what the unintended consequences might be of technology. And of course, this is increasingly pressing. At the moment, a lot of research effort has focused on privacy as a big concern around these technologies, safety and security, and even access. And we've seen that a lot this year again. But little is actually known about how to responsibly design conversational AI, particularly within that context for children. And in fact, UNICEF are probably one of the most key players at the moment who are starting to really pin down the responsibility aspect, to really think about when with their online harms paper that went to the select committee, who are starting to really think about these aspects. So there is a drive from policy, and there's a drive in academia, of course, as well, to do so, to start thinking about reflecting on the responsible development of conversational AI for children. But it's an area that isn't receiving quite as much attention or research effort as maybe it needs. And so this was something that we really wanted to pull together the latest knowledge on. And our team maps a way to sort of think about that social context, but then also to put that on over the sort of framework of what the technology can do or should do. And of course, that involved lots of back and forth between myself and Sondess and others as well in the team, which involved James Walker, Liam Maloney, and also we have a further paper coming out with Shauna Concannon from Cambridge. So this is quite an interdisciplinary effort.
So as Jenn have explained it, our main attempt was to develop this ethical, human-centered conversational AI technology that made the balance between AI innovation and ethical consideration. For that, we focused on the technical and societal aspect of conversational AI for children in order to provide recommendation for their adaptation in the real world and in the entertainment sector in particular. For that, to make this recommendation, it was necessary to review the conversational AI architecture and approach, as different methods pose distinct ethical challenge, and the form of interaction the system aims to support as well will require different architecture. So when I say different form of interaction, that could apply answering question about specific book or TV show, as our case, or more open-ended forms of dialogue. So the literature review that we have made, or the one that I made personally, it reviewed existing CAI technology, so conversational AI technology, challenge as well with respect to machine learning, natural language processing, and deep learning approach and innovation, and also each component of the conversational AI agent, as I will explain in the next slide. And how those different component requires coordination and integration of several disparate systems performing pseudo-simultaneous tasks. So as I said, what you are seeing here is the main architecture or the standard architecture of a conversational AI system that require coordination and integration, as I said, of several disparate systems performing pseudo-simultaneous tasks. For example, a typical task-oriented dialogue agent will be composed of 4 modules, as illustrated in this picture, starting from a natural language understanding module that identify the user intent and extract associated information. Then the second component will be a dialogue management or state tracker, which will track the dialogue state that capture all essential information in the conversation so far. The third one, or the third component, will be a natural language generation module for converting the agent actions into a natural language response. If we take example of any of the ASR, which is the core element in conversational AI that has direct impact on the quality of the interaction. So speech recognition is the main process that translates the spoken utterance into text. And this process in particular have different effect on, or have direct effect on the users, and in our case, on the children. So considering, for example, several sources of acoustic variability may cause, considering, for example, the source of acoustic variability, the speaker characteristic, for example, the dialect, the level of stress, and other variable like speaker variability, like momentary and longitude variation in the voice, for example, due to the emotional express, illness, age, etc. All of those are very important in order to develop an ethical conversational AI system for children. So there is a big trend on applying deep learning model for conversational AI. And that's because all the existing research is going toward an open-ended dialogue systems. But mostly there is two different type of conversational AI that are existing, and we had to look at both of them to be able to come up with a recommendation of which one is more suited for a child-friendly system. So dialogues are typically classified as task-oriented that support the user in completing specific task, or the open domain one that's able to speak on a range of topics as determined by the users, her or himself. So for the domain-specific one, they are a kind of frame-based approach that use a template model to offer a more flexible approach. So mainly they are based on the fact that we need to extract the user intent very accurately from the utterance, which is a crucial step in the NLU, natural language understanding model. In this case, the dialogue flow is not predetermined by the system, but adapts and incorporate the user input and can integrate additional information source to be able to generate human-like conversation. So we found this type of approach in question answering systems. We find them in, for example, like more concrete example in Alexa or Siri assistant. The open-ended dialogue one are data-driven models and our end-to-end approach that have seen great success due to the deep learning model, as I have mentioned. And this one needs the availability of a huge conversational data set, which is still a challenge for the time being. There is a lot of open benchmark that help to advance the research on this field, as well as pre-trained language models, and the transformer are the most known one, like BERT and others version of BERT. So CI application for children may encompass task-oriented or open-ended dialogue to support the functional education or entertainment-related interaction. However, the decision should be made based on ethical consideration that we aim to investigate further in this research work. So what I'm trying to say through this picture here, as it shows, and this is a picture extracted from Geo and all work. There is a huge transition from symbolic to neural, or there is symbolic to neural shifts. It's reshaping the conversational AI landscape by opening up new tasks and user experience that were not possible with older techniques. One reason for this is that neural approach provide a consistent representation for many modalities, capturing linguistic and non-linguistic, like image and video features in the same modeling framework. So at the end, neural approach can be trained in an end-to-end fashion and are robust to paraphrase alternation, but are weak in terms of execution efficiency and explicit interpretability. Sampling approach in the other side are difficult to train and sensitive to paraphrase alternation, but are more interpretable and efficient in execution. So if we're looking into a human-centered approach or a transparent approach, we need to make the choice between efficiency, accuracy, and explainability of the model we are building. So the design decisions are typically informed by the type of interaction we want to support and the ethical consideration we are making. The question is how to make the balance between both. There are many works that attempt to use hybrid method that combine the strength of both neural and symbolic approach in order to make this balance. Most of the popular personal assistant today's market, like Alexa, Siri, Google Home, or Cortana, are task-oriented bots, and that's because a few attempts like the Microsoft Chat were a good illustration of the big challenge end-to-end chatbot may pose. And in the case of child-friendly system, we are aware that it's a big risk to take if we want to use an end-to-end approach. Now, as I said, there is a growing interest in bridging the gap between the ethic and the AI practice and pressing need for good governance, as children are especially vulnerable to harm. Consideration of the impact of CI for children take center stage. As Jenn has mentioned, UNICEF has been at the front end of safeguarding of young people and their rights. They stated that the greatest impact of AI will be on children, and their recommendation is to closely examine privacy, safety, and security, providing identity protection, detecting harmful content, and focus on location detection and biological, psychological safety. So this application that we extract from reviewing the literature and both side and ethical and societal literature, as well as in the technical side, said to respond responsibly. We suggest that a range of actors across the AI community, including scholar and agency, need to come together to engage with those concerns. In our work, we draw on argumentation from within the academic literature on 4 emergent themes that we have identified, and those include cognitive and linguistic development, moral care and social behavior, ethical, regulatory and legal aspect of voice agent for children, and finally inclusivity, and thus include gender, race, to be considered when developing a child-friendly system. Jenn's gonna give you more insight into those themes and from the next slide.
Yeah, and so thank you, Sondess. So putting the ethical platform into practice then, really, as Sondess outlined, we have these sort of 4 main themes, if you like, 4 ethical themes, and then guiding questions, if you like, that were identified for ethical design of conversational AI. Just seen my cat has snuck into view. So a large part of this, and a large part of the literature and a large part of the work we undertook pertain to privacy and data protection. And of course, that relates much more closely to how we think about regulating AI technologies. And this is something that is a huge area of study, a huge area where there are new guidance, new regulations coming out, but there are still things falling through the cracks, and we know that just from the social discussions that go on, but particularly this is so pertinent when we come to thinking about children. And so one of the key things that we wanted to ask was how far and in relation to which regulations has AI safeguarded children's safety and their privacy, and in particular, how should those approaches be adopted to provide a moral safety, if you like, of those children. Another key area is around child development and cognitive and linguistic development. In particular, thinking about how do we think about actually bringing together a personalized and engaged technology at the same time as ensuring that they're still learning, they're still understanding moral codes of behavior. In particular, thinking about directing pro-social behavior and providing moral care over that. And so, for example, some of the research looks at these aspects. Moral care and social behavior in more detail looks at thinking about things like civility, communication, And then very importantly, inclusivity. How do we ensure that we bring in a range of voices? How do we ensure that children are engaging with technology that reflects and speaks to them as unique individuals? There's been some interesting work at the BBC developing their voice technology known as Beeb, and it's still again a tool that is in development. It's not out there yet, but one of the things they've been working very hard on is to make sure that the accent of the voice technology actually is reflective of the types of people that may engage with it. It's also something that they've thought through in terms of ensuring that people are feeling comfortable, that their voices have been listened to in the development of that technology, so that it's not just reflective of a small community. So really thinking about that inclusivity has been so important, and in particular how we reflect on and mitigate against bias was a really key part of the literature and a really key part of ensuring that this platform was something that we were pleased would be a responsible piece of technology. And one other point to make overarching all of this is, of course, the amount, and as Sondess talked us through, the amount of data that goes into the development of these technologies. So the key questions guiding us overall were what data will be collected and used from the individuals, and particularly pertinent for parental controls and permissions, and transparency over that. Where will that data be collected and used? How will it be used? How far in relation to what regulations will be put in place? And how do we actually ensure that the AI behaves, if you like, in a way that's actually going to be child friendly? How do we bring in those voices? And how do we ensure that we adapt these approaches to provide moral care and direct pro-social behaviour? And so mapping those sorts of issues, we build a little bit on what Ruan and Al talked about, and an understanding of the domain and the problem that the agent aims to solve should inform the identification of possible ethical concerns and solutions. And so whatever the domain of use effectively should give us some indication as to the types of ethical questions it might raise, and particularly when you think about the creative industries. The purpose there with the BBC example is to engage, but also entertain and to educate. And so, very importantly, trust in those systems and a fairness of those that it involves, which create equitable outcomes, is absolutely paramount. And I know that that's something that UNICEF are particularly interested in. And so, from the outset, thinking about ways in which these systems' behaviours could be harmful, and in what ways, to whom and why, as well as thinking about underlying issues such as the lived experience of those people who might be affected by NLP systems. If you imagine things around bias, for example, are very crucial to reflect on, and it's that reflexivity that we're really encouraging, because so often technology is developed because it can be, and not necessarily because it should be. And these issues are particularly pertinent to children because, of course, we need to think about safeguarding them. And I think Sondess mentioned the DCMS's online harms paper, and I certainly mentioned it at the start, where we're key to, we're very clear and transparent on making sure that we safeguard the privacy, the security, and the rights of young people. So users should be able to, in that light, ask questions of their devices about how the data is used. There's a big focus on transparency and explainability, again, as Sondess mentioned. How is this data going to be used, and how do we ensure that that data is not being exploited in any way? And this still remains relatively unclear, and many actors in the industry are quite risk averse around these technologies for somewhat obvious reasons. But it is about challenging the assumptions as well that might be made, that this could be a benign technology. Of course, it's not the technology itself that is benign or harmful. It's those behind who need to consider approaches in order to recognise and consider the implications of that technology. And so working directly with developers is absolutely key going forward to the responsible innovation of them. For example, there's an example here about NLP systems and bias, for example, thinking about the importance of persona and how they might be anthropomorphized, etc. And these are key issues for students and for younger people. So we've got to the end of our talk. We've raised probably more questions than we've answered them. And this, it's important to note that a lot of this project is preliminary. A large amount of it involved reviewing the literature, seeing where those issues are, looking at the technological kind of issues as well, and trying to marry those up, and then to make a set of recommendations, if you like, to Joy Poloi. And what we came up with were a series of example questions that they could ask themselves, almost like a checklist. And I know there's going to be more work in this area, and of course that involves a whole body of researchers across hopefully the UK and the world, working together to ensure that these pertinent questions, these pressing issues are answered and are considered in order to keep our young people safe as they engage and hopefully enjoy this technology. So if there's any questions, we'd love to take them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.